I'm just so bad at making choices, like, in general, but when it comes to reading, I also find it really difficult, and I just, like, if you ask me to narrow down my favourite books of a year to, like, 10 books or 5, that's just, it's so hard. Like, it's so hard. Like, does anyone else ever have trouble with that, or is it just me? Hi everybody, and welcome back to my booktube channel, Books with Leo, and today I'm going to be talking about my favourite books of 2020. I already did a video where I talked about all of the books that I read in 2020, like my reading year in review sort of video, and I had such a difficult time trying to narrow down my absolute favourites of this year. So what I'm trying to say is that in that video I already discussed like a lot of highlights and books that I would love to discuss in this video as well, because I really loved them, but I just had to make choices, you know. So if you want to know some more books and recommendations of books I absolutely loved reading in 2020, then definitely check out that video. And in this video I'm just only going to be talking about my absolute favourites, but like making choices was really, really hard. So some of those other books are also kind of my favourites, but yeah. Choices had to be made, they were made, and today you're watching this video, so let's get right into it. Okay, so I don't have all of the books here with me, but I've written them down in my little notebook. Let's see. I've narrowed it down to a selection of 7 books, which was really difficult. This selection is in no particular order, although there was one like that really stood out, but I think we already know which book that is. If you don't know, then you're probably new here. Welcome. Hi, my name's Leora. I talk about books. The first favourite book that I read in 2020 that I want to talk about is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. I'm into romance. I'm so into romance, and this book played a big role in that in 2020. Because before I read this book, I never felt like romance was really my jam, was really like my thing. And I'd read a few romances that I thought were cute and that I enjoyed, but there were none that really made me go like, oh my god, I love this. This is one of my favourite things. It makes me so, so happy. Yeah, Heartstopper maybe. But besides from Heartstopper, not a lot of romances make me that enthusiastic. Like, I read Treasure by Rebecca Weatherspoon. Also absolutely loved that one. Okay, I'm drifting off. Anyway, Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert was the first romance that really, really clicked with me. And Talia Hibbert's writing just is so... it's just so fun, you know? If you want to read for fun, to have like an escape, her writing is perfect. It's got so much humour and it's lighthearted, but at the same time, a lot of her books do tackle some important subjects. So for example, in Get a Life, Chloe Brown, we follow Chloe Brown, who's chronically ill. She's just sitting at home, sheltering herself because she's always tired, because she's dealing with this chronic illness and she's got a lot of pain to deal with. And she's sort of distanced herself from her friends and all the people she had around her, except for her sisters. She has like a near-death experience and she decides, God, I have to start actually living. I've got this life in front of me, I should live it. So very classically, she makes a list of all the things she still wants to do in her life, and she's like, I'm gonna do them. I'm gonna do the things on the list and I'm gonna live my life, you know? And like some of the things on this list are like, have meaningless sex, go night out, go like clubbing, I don't know, fly a plane. That's not one of them. Ride a motorcycle. That was the one I meant. Okay, very different. Anyway, so she basically makes this list, and then she meets this guy called Red, who is sort of like, he's not her landlord, but he like manages part of the apartment building where she lives. I'm not entirely sure how this is working, but he's like sort of the supervisor of the building. He's not like the doorman. I don't know. He does like stuff around the building, like handyman stuff. But he used to be a painter. And they kind of, there's like a tension, like something going on there. And she's a web developer and he needs a website, so they decide to sort of partner up, and then he helps her with the list. It is so fun, and also just the relationship between Chloe and her sisters, like the other sisters, is just so cool. I love reading about sibling relationships, especially if they're good and nice and funny. And yeah, I loved this book, and I loved all of Talia Hibbert's other books that I read this year as well. It was only one, but I really loved that one too. And it's just her writing is so lighthearted and so funny, and it just makes me so happy, which is just really great. So this is definitely a book that was a new favourite this year. Last year, I mean, in 2020. Another book that I read in 2020 that I adored was Not Your Sidekick by C.B. Lee. I really read this one on like the brink of 2021. It was like one of the few last days of 2020, and I love this so much. It's basically about a world where people have superpowers. So there's like DNA mutations and people have superpowers, and some of these people go to like superhero school and become superheroes, and others just have like superpowers that are too low graded to actually do something with them. And we follow Jess, and her parents are superheroes, which is really cool, but they have like a secret identity, you know. And her sister is currently in school to be a superhero as well, and she wants to have a superpower so badly, but it appears to be that she does not have one, and she's really sad about it. And after years of like trying to figure out if she has a superpower, she decides, I'm just going to put my time and energy into something else, and she finds herself a nice internship to do next to school. But then she discovers this internship is actually for the villain that her parents are always fighting against, because her parents are superheroes. Ooh. And then there's also this girl that she has a huge crush on, and she works at the same internship. And yeah, that's all I'm going to tell you guys. This novel was a little bit predictable, but I enjoyed it so much. Like, similar to Get a Life, Chloe Brown, it just gave me so much joy and happiness. It made me laugh out loud, and it just made me feel so good, you know. And in this really weird year we had in 2020, I needed some feel-good stories that are like slightly outrageous but so fun, you know. That's just what I needed, and this book delivered, so I was really happy to read it in this year. Another book that I really loved this year was The Final Empire, or Mistborn Book 1 by Brandon Sanderson. I've talked about this book a lot, but that was because this was my absolute favourite that I've read the last year. I think it's been a really long time since I had this much fun reading a book. Like, I was giggling, laughing out loud, I was like reenacting parts of the conversation, I was screaming, I was really involved. I was so into it. Like, everything about this was just so good, and now I want to read all of Brandon Sanderson's book, like all of them. I'm gonna read all of his books. That's the plan. Like, I don't know when, but I really want to read all of them. And like, I've only read 2 of his books, but already in my head he's like up there with my fantasy favorites, like Robin Hobb, you know. It's like he's like up there on the list. Anyway, I really enjoyed this book. This is about Vin, and she's basically a street urchin. So there's different powers in this world, and it's kind of like, I'm not really sure how to explain it, but it's basically steals, like metal alloys. So you have like copper, and you have, God, what else do you have? I don't speak English right now. So you have basically different steel alloys. You have iron, steel, tin, pewter, brass, zinc, copper, and bronze. And all of these different alloys have different powers. So for example, one of them pulls on nearby metals, one can soothe emotions, one can riot emotions, one can hide elemency, which is like, these powers are called elemency. But there's also people that have all of these powers, and those people are Mistborn. And basically we follow Vin, who has to learn elemency because she's like not really using it very controlled. She's not really sure what she's capable of, and she's basically living on the streets, and she gets picked up by this street gang who's planning to go on a heist with all these misfits basically that all have powers. And yeah, while they're at it, they also try to overthrow this really horrible regime that is existing and allowing slavery. So the premise of this book is basically, what if the evil guy won, and like, what would that world look like, and what would the people do living in that world? And they're trying to overthrow the bad guy that already won, obviously. So I think that's a really cool take on a lot of classic fantasy novels. And I also think that the world is just really cool. The powers are really cool. The main character's really cool. I love Vin with all my heart. This book just has a lot of elements that I really enjoy in stories. So there's like balls and like ball gowns and like formal events happening where our main character has to go to, but there's also a lot of fighting and a lot of street gangs going on heists, which is my favorite fantasy trope. Oh my god, I've said that in like 20 videos already up until this point. But yeah, this book is just everything I love, and yeah, I've read the second book as well. I still have to read the third book in this series, and I hope I love that one just as much as I love this one. Another book that I really loved this year was You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. This was such a cute book. This is also one of those books that just make me really happy. I read this in the summer, like sitting on my balcony, like having my feet in a little tub and just like sunbathing, and I had such a good time. So we follow Liz, who has this really big dream of going to this school, and she basically wants to get a scholarship. She's got like this whole plan. She's only ever had like really good grades. She's always worked really hard to get into school because she needs the scholarship, but then she doesn't get chosen for the scholarship, and sort of her whole world just collapses around her. Like, all her plans and dreams and future is just like, oh my god, it's over. Then she realizes that if she runs for prom queen and she wins, she could take that prize money and then afford her school. So, new plan. There's a new plan. So this is what Liz decides to do, but then she meets Mac, who's also running for prom queen, and yeah, she's a really cool girl, and they kind of like each other, and then it's like, God, what should I do now? And this romance, it's a contemporary, but it's also got lots of humor, there's lots of romance, there's lots of important topics being discussed, such as racism, but also sexuality, and it's just really, really lovely, and I enjoyed it so much. I also think that Liz's mum or her brother, or maybe both of them, have sickle cell disease, which is a disease that I have not read about ever in any book, actually. That was also really nice that I had that extra representation and subject being breached in this book. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed this book, and it was such a fun, fluffy read, but still packed some really important themes in there. And yeah, just a nice high school contemporary that I really enjoyed. The next book that was one of my favourites this year was Lady Killers by Tori Telfer. I know that this is really different from all of the other books I read this year. For starters, this is a non-fiction book, and I don't read a lot of non-fiction, but I really enjoyed this book. It's basically about all of these female serial killers. In history, we talk a lot about male serial killers, but when it comes to female serial killers, a lot of the times they get set away in like these stereotypes. They're always like the femme fatale or the creepy grandmother killer, or they don't get taken as seriously as male serial killers. And of course, like, you should never idolize any killer. That's just wrong. But it is really fascinating to me. And I think a lot of other people that are interested in true crime feel the same, where they just find it so fascinating to read about these things and what people are capable of. This book just focuses on a lot of the female serial killers that history kind of forgot and that weren't as big in the media as their male counterparts were. So yeah, this book was really definitely one of my favorites, and I've read a lot more non-fiction the last year than I do regularly, so that's also something I'm really happy about. The next book that was one of my favorites in the last year was Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I know a lot of people don't like this book, but I really, really loved it. It was just like a lot of the other books on this list, it just brought me a lot of joy. What can I say? It made me happy. I think especially in a world right now that is so scary sometimes, it was just so nice to imagine like a world where things would be better, and that's kind of what this book did for me, to be honest. So it is it's a little bit ridiculous. It's a romance, and it is between the first son, so Alex Claremont Diaz, who was like the son of the President of America in this book, and Henry, who's the Prince of England. So it's basically a romance between the first son of America and the Prince of England, and it's ridiculous, but it's so good. It's just, this book is hilarious. It had me laughing out loud, and it was so funny and scandalous, you know, and it was just, it was such a fun thing. So it's basically also a little bit enemies to lovers, because they really, really don't like each other, but then they get wrapped up in this press scandal, so they have to pretend to be friends, and then they kind of fall for each other. And some of the conversations about sexuality and bisexuality were so lovely to read. It's so nice to read about that somewhere. A lot of humor, a lot of scandalous things happening. Just a really, really enjoyable read overall. And Casey McQuiston is also coming out with a female-female romance. I'm not sure when, but it's called One Last Stop, and I'm really, really excited to read that one as well, so I can't wait. Now, the pièce de résistance of this video. I can't believe I said that with an English accent. Pièce de résistance. Oh, it wasn't... Okay, never mind. Anyway, the last book I want to talk about is Loveless by Alice Oseman, which was also a big favourite this year. I only finished this, I think, in November, and I already want to read it again. Oh, this made me so happy. All of Alice Oseman's work makes me so happy. Like, almost every year one of her books makes it to my top favorites list, and like, I'm not sure how she does it, but she does it every time, and this year it happened again. And this book is about Georgia, who is planning to find love when she goes to university, because she's never really had a crush or any romantic feelings for anybody, but she desperately wants it. She really wants to feel that romance, and she wants to have a beautiful romance with somebody. She goes to university and she's like, it's gonna happen for me. But then she learns about all these new things, such as aromanticism and being asexual, and she's like, oh, maybe, you know. So this is basically coming of age. It's Georgia's discovery of herself and her friendships and her university life. And we follow her friends Rooney and Pip and Jason as well. We don't follow their perspectives, but they're like also involved in the story. And they're a lovely friendship group to read about. I always really enjoy the relationships between people that Alice Oseman writes. I loved that this was set in university, because a lot of the coming of age stories we get are set in high school. So I really enjoyed that as well. And yeah, this just really made me happy, and it was so wonderful. Okay, I think those were all of my favourite books of 2020 that I wanted to talk about today. Don't forget to check out my 2020 Reading It in Review video if you haven't seen it yet. And yeah, definitely let me know down below what was your absolute favourite book of the year that you think I should also definitely check out. And if you don't know what to comment, just comment a cute baby animal, I don't care what, comment a duckling or a little owl or an octopus, just something cute. And I will know you're there, and it will make me really happy, but it makes me happy anyway. Like, you don't have to comment. I'm glad you're all watching and you're all here, and it's really nice. So yeah, definitely let me know what were your favourites, and yeah, I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys!